One highly debated issue in the Christian community is the issue of the death penalty or capital punishment. Does the state have the right to put criminals to death in certain circumstances? When it comes to the Catholic position, there is a lot of confusion. Many of the ancient popes, such as Pope St. Leo I, Pope St. Innocent I, and Pope Nicholas I, all seem to support the death penalty. However, many recent popes have seemed to take a different approach. Pope St. John Paul II, for example, seemed to indicate that there was little to no circumstance in today's society where capital punishment would be permitted. Pope Francis called the death penalty inadmissible, and more recently, then Cardinal Robert Prevost, aka future Pope Leo XIV, called for the abolition of the death penalty. This issue has gained more traction with the recent assassination of conservative influencer Charlie Kirk. Many have called for the suspected gunman, Tyler Robinson, to face the death penalty if he is convicted of Kirk's assassination. But is this in line with Catholic teaching? In this area, many Catholics have remained divided. On paper, it seems that St. Thomas Aquinas' view on the death penalty seems to be in support of the procedure. According to St. Thomas, quote, "It is lawful to kill dumb animals, insofar as they are naturally directed to man's use, as the imperfect is directed to the perfect. Now every part is directed to the whole, as imperfect to perfect. Whatever part is naturally for the sake of the whole. For this reason, we observe that the health of the whole body demands the execution of a member. However, in more recent years, Pope Francis seemed to take a position that seems to run in contrary to St. Thomas's views on paper. He says, quote, "No matter how serious the crime has been committed, the death penalty is inadmissible." This has led many to think that there is a contradiction in the Catholic teaching, and that the Catholic Church has merely modernized to certain liberal positions. But in all reality, there is perfect continuity between the two stances. So, how does this relate to Charlie Kirk's killer? Does this mean that the death penalty is admissible or inadmissible? First, we must understand St. Thomas's view of when murder is admissible, justified. According to St. Thomas Aquinas, in order for a murder to be justified, it must fall under the consequences of double effect. In such a principle, harm to another person or creature might be justified if it's morally good and ultimately protects the peace of an individual or a greater society. For example, in the case of murder, such an act always causes harm, but if a person kills in self-defense because their life is in danger, then the act is no longer considered immoral because ultimately it protects the life of the citizen. This leads to St. Thomas's second premise when it comes to the death penalty. It must be executed according to right order. Whenever the taking of life is ever executed, it must be done according to right order. For example, a vigilante who goes out and murders criminals or arrests criminals commits grave harm because they take improper justice into their own hands, thus creating disorder. This is an affront to a society where justice must be communicated to all its members. Likewise, religious clergy also cannot execute such judgment, since that would be an affront to their office. Hence, the intellect whose life is threatened must be the one to make the judgment to take a person's life. They are only given the right order to commit such an act if the principle of double effect is necessary. For if a person's life is in danger, then they, being the protectors of their own lives, have the jurisdiction to make decisions about how to protect their own well-being. Now, as it pertains to the society in general, St. Thomas takes from Aristotle, who says that man's dignity is usurped into the society that he lives in. In such manner, It is lawful for the state to put a person to death if and only if the person's very existence rises to the principle of double effect. That is to say, that the person's existence or the weight of the person's crime ultimately threatens the society as a whole. St. Thomas compares this to a body. In the same manner that cutting off a body part ultimately does harm to the overall body, yet, if a body part potentially causes the death to an individual, it is noble for the person to then cut off that body part, such as a soldier who needs to amputate his leg to survive. It is in like manner justified for the state to put a person to death if and only if the person's very existence in turn threatens the overall good and peace of the society at large. And it is here where we ultimately go into the modern Catholic positions on capital punishment. When Pope St. John Paul opposed capital punishment, he did so on the basis that in today's modern society, there really aren't many situations that rise to the principle of double effect. That's not to say that in the past, there haven't been threats in the world, such as Adolf Hitler's existence during World War II, that did warrant the state putting a person to death. However, in today's modern society, such a measure has become increasingly rare. And this leads us back to the opinion of Pope Francis, whose views on capital punishment were arguably most in opposition to the subject. Pope Francis does imply that capital punishment in the past has been justified. However, in today's modern society, there are very rare instances that rise to the principle of double effect. The heinousness of a crime does not warrant capital punishment. Though the individual's actions may be extremely immoral, the ultimate killing of the person creates disorder, as this does not give the state the proper jurisdiction or authority to put the person to death. Engaging in such disorder can deprive the larger community of the communication of justice. And this same principle applies to Kirk's alleged gunman, Tyler Robinson. Although Robinson's actions were clearly evil and horrific, it is also clear that those actions do not rise to the standpoint where the state has the ability to put him to death. And doing so would be against right reason, regardless of the heinousness of his crime. If you like what you see in this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And also hit that notification bell. And also make sure to comment what you think.